I never thought a simple secret could almost break the one friendship I thought was unbreakable. I mean, you hear about friendships going through rough patches, right? But what if I told you that mine kinda shattered because of something I wasn't even supposed to know? Weird, huh? So, picture this. You've got this best friend, you know, the kind who's been there since forever. We shared everything, from late-night pizza runs to cramming for exams, and somehow it all felt bulletproof. Then, out of nowhere, that friend starts acting like a total stranger. Like, someone you thought you knew inside out suddenly grows a wall so thick you don't even recognize them anymore. What would you do if that happened? If the person who used to finish your sentences, who built half your college memories with you, suddenly shut you out? That's what started to unravel between me and Chris. We were tight, seriously tight, then boom, he turned cold. No explanation, no warning. I remember the first time it hit me. We were chilling in our usual spot on campus, this old bench by the library where we'd claimed territory with doodles and stickers. That day, Chris barely looked at me. His usual easy smile was gone, replaced by this weird tension, like he was waiting for me to just get lost. I tried to crack a joke, the way we always did to break whatever awkward silence popped up, but it just didn't land. That moment was like a slap in the face because things hadn't been like this before. At all. It was subtle at first. Texts took longer to reply, plans fell through with some lame excuse, and when we did hang out, the vibe felt off, like invisible lines between us had suddenly popped up overnight. And honestly, it was confusing as hell. I kept asking myself what had changed, what I'd missed. Was it something I said, or was it Maya? See, Maya was my girlfriend, and though she was great, somehow the atmosphere between me and Chris shifted the second she entered the picture, even if no one ever said it out loud. I guess that's when the secret started brewing, the one Chris told me he needed me to keep, but somehow it started eating away at the friendship more than anything else. I can still feel how heavy that moment was, like holding a grenade without knowing when it'd explode. But it didn't just explode in a quiet way, it changed everything. I swear, I kept replaying conversations over and over, trying to spot the exact point where things went sideways. And it wasn't just me, Maya noticed it too. They both acted like they were sidestepping minefields whenever we all crossed paths. You can probably imagine how brutal that felt. A friendship that used to be a fortress now felt like a crumbling house, every creak making you wonder if it'd all fall apart for good. The worst part? No one was ready to talk about it. Us, Jake, our mutual friend who watched the whole thing unfold like a spectator at a bad game. None of us could really pin down what was going on. And when you don't talk about what's wrong, the silence just grows louder. So yeah, that's where it all started. From being inseparable to barely exchanging a, "Hey!" And somewhere in between, a secret pulled us apart in ways I never expected. Chris and I? We were like, well, what people call best friends. We'd met on the first day of college, bumped into each other while reaching for the last slice of pepperoni pizza in the dining hall, classic, right? That moment kind of set the tone for us, a little chaotic, a lot of laughter, and zero chance either of us was about to back down. From that day on, we were inseparable. Our routine was practically sacred. Classes, then crash sessions at that sketchy coffee shop down the street where the Wi-Fi was terrible but the cinnamon rolls were god tier. We'd banter endlessly, Chris with his sarcastic quips, me throwing in my bad puns just to make him groan. Honestly, it was the kind of friendship where you didn't even need to fill the silence. It was comfortable, like shared breathing. Oh, and summer nights? Those were gold. We'd grab our bikes and just ride around town, talking about everything and nothing, watching the stars like we owned the sky. And then Maya came around. She wasn't just my girlfriend, she was this bright spark who somehow managed to brighten the grayest days. Smart, funny, with this way of looking at the world that made everything feel fresh. Chris liked her at first, or so I thought. But the thing is, as Maya popped more into the picture, that effortless rhythm between me and Chris started hitting some odd notes. At first, I chalked it up to just new dynamics. You know how life throws curveballs. Maybe Chris was just adjusting to having Maya around, someone else in our circle. But it felt less like adjustment and more like withdrawal. Like he was slowly receding, slipping away just enough that I could barely hold on to the edge. One evening, we all met up at Jake's place. Jake, he's this easygoing guy, kind of the glue between many of our friend groups. The way he looked between me and Chris that night, squinting like he was trying to decode a hidden message, was priceless. "Something's up with you two," Jake finally said, half joking, but not really. Chris gave a tight smile, shrugged, and hid behind this "nothing's wrong" mask that was cracking just a little. "We're fine," Chris said, but there was a hesitance in his voice I hadn't heard before. That night, the undercurrent was impossible to ignore. Maya and I exchanged quick, worried glances across the room. Later, when we finally had a moment alone, she whispered, "Is he mad at you?" I didn't know what to say. I wanted to brush it off, to tell her it was nothing, but deep down, something was definitely off. And then the text started, Chris's replies becoming shorter, colder, more distant. "Busy." Sorry, can't tonight, maybe next time, phrases turning into bricks building a wall I wasn't sure I could climb. One afternoon, I met Chris by that old library bench, hoping to catch whatever thread of the friendship was left. He was there, but different. Quiet, guarded. I need to tell you something, he said, voice low, like he was confessing to a crime. I nodded, heart pounding. It's. I don't want you to tell anyone. With that, he leaned in and shared a secret that I wasn't sure how to carry. It wasn't just a secret, it was a weight pulling him down, and suddenly, me knowing it made this invisible divide feel even wider. I promised. I never told anyone, but it gnawed at the edges of everything. The laughs felt forced afterward, the hangouts strained. And Jake? He noticed, of course. Man, you're carrying a lot, Jake said during one of our late night talks. You gotta figure out how to handle this before it kills the friendship. I wanted to believe that was possible. I really did. But by the time I tried to confront Chris, hoping for clarity, it turned into a mess of half-truths and slammed doors. Figuratively, though I think actual doors got slammed too. We walked away from that conversation more tangled than ever, and that's where things stood. Two best friends caught in a silence so loud it drowned out the good times. The question that hung over both of us wasn't just about a secret anymore, it was about whether what we had could survive the secrets at all. So, after that awkward spill of the secret, things between Chris and me kinda entered this weird limbo. It was like we both knew something shifted, but neither of us wanted or maybe dared to put a label on it. I remember sitting on my bed one night, scrolling through my phone, staring at his last message that just said, "Can't talk now." Simple, yes, but it felt heavier than any essay stress or exam pressure I'd faced all semester. The worst part was how the everyday stuff started twisting into these little landmines. Like, I'd try to joke around like we used to, but he'd just stare at me, maybe smile faintly, but it wasn't the Chris I knew. It was like he was testing if I still knew how to navigate that strange new version of him. The one that wasn't quite a stranger, but definitely not a best friend anymore. One afternoon, I bumped into Jake at the campus quad. Him calm, collected, always the voice of reason, looked at me with those knowing eyes, the kind that said, "Bro, you're drowning here, aren't you?" "Talk to him, man," Jake said in that low, serious tone he uses when something's really bugging him. "If you don't get it out in the open, this whole thing's gonna rot from the inside out." I wanted to believe it was that simple. I really did. So, I agreed to meet up with Chris again at that library bench. It had been our spot for years, a kind of unofficial headquarters for our friendship, decked out with our doodles and stickers. But this time, the bench felt cold, like a stage stripped of its props. Chris was already there when I arrived. He looked tired, like he'd been carrying a weight on his shoulders for weeks. No, months. When I sat down, the silence stretched for a moment, thick enough you could practically hear it creak. Finally, I blurted out, "Look, I know something's up. You told me that secret, but it feels like it pulled us apart or something." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck like he'd been rehearsing this moment and still wasn't ready. "It's not just the secret," he said quietly, "it's everything. Maya, me feeling like an outsider, I don't even know who I'm supposed to be anymore." I blinked, caught off guard. "Outsider? You're my best friend Chris. That hasn't changed." "Maybe it has," he snapped, then immediately looked sorry, softer. "I guess I'm scared, man. Scared that things won't ever go back to how they were?" There it was, the admission I half expected but hoped I'd never hear. Somehow, that vulnerability made me feel even more helpless. I wanted to say, "We can fix this," but words stuck like glue. And then things spiraled. I asked if he wanted to come hang out more or talk, and he said, "Not right now," like a door closing in slow motion. I tried to push back, frustrated. "Why not? Don't you trust me?" His eyes were hard to read. "It's not that simple." And then he walked off before I could reply. I sat there on that bench, echoing with silence, the weight of unsaid things pressing down. Later, when I told Jake what happened, he just gave me one of those looks again. "You guys are circling each other like vultures. Either you dive in or you fly away." That choice gnawed at me. Every time I thought about calling Chris, sending a message, or trying to force a hangout, this knot in my stomach tightened. The friendship that was once this unbreakable bond felt like a fragile thread fraying fast. So, there I was, stuck between wanting to save what we had and wondering if it even still existed. And Chris? He was pulling further into himself, like a secret locked behind a door neither of us had the key to anymore. Sometimes, I'd catch him glancing my way across the campus, eyes flickering with that complicated mix of old familiarity and new distance. But the conversation we needed, the one that could clear all this up, kept dodging us. Like running into a dead end every time we tried to find a way forward, leaving us frustrated, tangled in misunderstandings and silence. That secret Chris shared, it wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a chasm between us, widening day by day, and no matter how much I wished it wasn't, I knew things couldn't stay the same. After weeks of that silent tension tugging at everything we built, I knew I couldn't just wait for Chris to come around, or worse, for the friendship to quietly die off like a plant left neglected on a windowsill. So, I decided to make the first move, even though every ounce of me wanted to just pretend it wasn't happening and cling to the memories of how things used to be. I texted him one evening, something simple. Can we meet? I think we owe this friendship that much. It wasn't elegant, but it was honest. Surprisingly, he replied almost immediately with a time and place. Our old library bench, the same one that had witnessed so many jokes, arguments, and late-night planning sessions. Sitting down next to him felt surreal, as if for a moment time rewound to before the cracks ever showed. We started talking haltingly at first. I picked my words carefully, trying not to trip over the weight of everything unsaid. Chris opened up more than I expected, not just about the secret he'd confided in me, but about how vulnerable he'd felt trying to navigate the new triangle involving Maya and me. You have no idea how hard it was to watch you two together, he admitted quietly. It felt like I was on the outside looking in, like your world didn't have room for me anymore. That stung. Not because I didn't want him there, it was the opposite, but because I hadn't realized how much he'd been shutting himself away. I told him that yeah, I loved Maya, but it wasn't a competition. You're family, man, that doesn't just switch off. For a while it felt like the dam was breaking, words spilling out, laughter even sneaking through the cracks of awkwardness. We promised to be more upfront, to try harder to include each other, even if it meant uncomfortable conversations. But here's where reality settled, like an uninvited guest at the party. Things were never going to go back to exactly how they were. That version of our friendship, the unbreakable, effortless, always in sync duo, was kind of a beautiful, fragile bubble from our past. We were stepping into something different now, shaped by new experiences and new challenges. Over the next few weeks, we hung out more, talked more, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of something changed. Sometimes, the silence between conversations held all the things we weren't ready or able to say. It was bittersweet, like visiting a place you love after the colors have faded a little. Maya noticed the shift too. She joked that we were like an old married couple, bickering over who orders dinner and who forgot to text back. I think she was right in a weird way. There was comfort, but also friction. It wasn't simple, it never is. I won't pretend this story ties up neatly with a big bow. Chris and I didn't fix everything and then live happily ever after. Instead, we learned that sometimes friendships morph. They survive in new forms rather than the old familiar ones. And holding on to that can be just as meaningful even if it feels a bit messy. So, here I am, still figuring it out. Still wondering if the silence that sometimes fills the spaces between us is just part of growing up, or if it's a sign of something lost for good. I guess what I'm curious about is, how would you handle a friendship like this? The kind that's been your rock, but suddenly feels like shifting sand? Would you fight to rebuild the exact same bridge, or build a new one altogether? Either way, I'm learning the hard way that some secrets change everything, but maybe they don't have to end everything.